Hello everybody, my name is Eric Terramons, and today we're going to be checking out Goodsmile Company's Lineage's Dark Elf. She's a 1/8 figure, and Dark Elves are just freaking awesome. I have so many Monster Girl figures and Robot Girl figures, and I really don't have very much when it comes to the Sylvan persuasion. Not to say that they haven't been releasing a whole bunch of different elf girls over the years, it's just to say that there aren't any at the moment that have particularly caught my eye, though there are a couple I'm looking forward to seeing updates on, and what I wouldn't give for a record of Lodos War D-Lit or Pure Tests. I know that there's a couple of them that have been made over the past couple of years, but being a huge fan of Record of Lodos, I'm very particular about how I want my D-Lit. I'm going off topic. Her base plate is simple, black, gloss, plasticky. It has the Lineage 2, the Chaotic Throne title thrown in the center there. I do like the font and the line work for the 2. I think it does a really good job at keeping things feel fantasy, but this is really not a good base plate. Its simplicity and boringness aside, it is relatively small. It doesn't take up too much space, which is lovely. It's hollowed out underneath. The plastic feels somewhat solid. There are these black chunks where the pegs go through, and these pegs are in plastic, so that's not the best in the world. And she doesn't necessarily stick into it very well. So you gotta be careful when moving her around. Be sure to hold the figure and the base. As for wobbling, she indeed wobbles quite a bit, but she still feels relatively solid despite that. Not once in the many years that I've had her have I ever been worried that she'll just fall off because of wobbling. Her thigh-high heels have a very nice shaded gradient, having a nice dark metallic blue shaded over with a high gloss black. Lovely little gold trim around here, somewhat messy. Aside from the weapon she carries in her left hand, these heels could also be seen as quite the weapon. As we go up into her thigh highs, all I can think of looking at these legs is high dexterity and finesse. The back of the knees, unfortunately, don't get any nice stretches or pulls in the fabric, but the knees are decently defined along the front, where we then have beautiful elven sculpt work. A mixture of a dark bronze-looking color, some silvers, and it seems like there may even be a little bit of metallic, warmer bronze. The whole thing about this sculpt is incredibly ambitious, not perfectly executed, but very well done, especially considering the price point, which I'll get into at the end of the review. Then we get into her lovely tanned skin, and this is just amazing, and I want many more figures like this. I would have probably gone maybe 15-20% darker, but this is still really lovely. I had gotten this figure many years ago, used from Amiami. She was supposed to be in an A condition, however... The problem with keeping characters in the boxes and keeping all the plastics on them, for those of you that really want to collect and keep things pristine and new and never release them, is, especially with older figures, a lot of those plastics that are pushed in with the figure. I'm going to use this vodka mirror box as my reference. This figure came in this box, and if I had chosen to leave her in there with all the little plastic sleeves on top of her and everything for years to come, eventually the acid from this plastic is going to bleed into that figure like there's no tomorrow. This happens to most figures because, unfortunately, yet it makes 100% sense, this isn't archival grade plastics. You're not going to use archival grade plastics on a figure that most companies, it'll just end up costing you so much more money for your figure. Not to mention the companies themselves want to save every dime they can, and they kind of expect you to take them out of the box. It's rough for some of you super collectors out there. I understand this. I've actually had some horror stories happen to me before because I left some figures in the box. It just is what it is. Whereas something like this is archival safe. However, you pay an arm and a leg to have your comics and cards shipped out to these companies, so I would expect it to be. So when I had gotten her from Amiami, some of the plastics that were on top of her to protect her actually started to peel off her paint as I slowly removed them. It was almost like they were glued onto her body. It was awful, and when I tried contacting Amiami about it, they were just like, it wasn't like that when we sent it to you. And I'm here thinking, of course it wasn't. You put all the plastics on her, or she came in those plastics. So it's just the slow peel off of that, still removed a bit of paint. Just such a shame. Paint jobs aside, the plastics in which she's created with are also not the best to survive the test of time. I have a lot of figures in my life, and I have some that are much older than her, and they don't get any kind of gunk or aging to them, and this figure here has had a numerous amount of problems where I had to use Q-tips, clean her up really carefully, try not to ruin any of the parts to her, and I still couldn't clean her 100%. I've always had her in a glass display cabinet, and I've been very careful not to have her in any kind of direct sunlight. Yet she's still slowly withering away, and that's also a shame. You can see that they tried to do a minor beveling of her skin into her clothing. where it's not particularly well done, but it's not terrible either for a 1/8 at this price point. The legs themselves are extremely well sculpted, very dynamic hip movements, but unfortunately, here and there, we can actually see lines from the runner or mold casting in which she was created. These mold lines are atrocious. Imagine sculpting something so incredibly well, and just the production ends up botching up your hard work. Turning her around, we can see her very shapely behind, worthy of an anime dark elf, where her armor bathing suit clothing really goes way in there. Yeah. From the back, they have a couple of designs here, though the gold isn't as shiny and metallic as I would have liked. And for real, that's kind of a repetition all over this figure, where you have all these beautiful gold designs, but the gold doesn't particularly stay or flash as much as it flashes in other areas. I feel like you just lose too many details without it. Her back has a beautiful defining line for her spine, and it's extremely curved in that pretty fey way. Very strong defining shoulder blades on top of this cute little decoupage that kind of seems almost like little wings that curve around her body and into her main suit that she's wearing. This main suit has lovely design work all across it, though I'd say it kind of suffers from the same thing that you get from the rest of the parts of her with the line work, that the gold trim just should have been more pronounced. That aside, the sculpt work to it is phenomenally well done, with beautiful curvatures of the front of her stomach. We get a very fine silhouette of inward beveling from her belly button, and all these beautiful high elf looking designs go all the way up into this sharp cut V for her chest. And this is one heck of a deep cut V. The clothing part itself has this beautiful and elegant gold on gold design with some lovely line work. It's a nice mix between gloss and metallics, and it's a little form-fitting and a little snug wrapped around her chest. Like the rest of this figure, her chest is extremely well sculpted. I am very impressed with it. The beveling we get here of her skin is perfect. Everything is so a little fantasy large, but at the same time, it's very realistically done in its depiction. The way everything is pushed up does a great job at accentuating her upper chest nicely, as we get this beautiful, deep carving for her collarbone. And with her bare shoulders and everything that's going on here, it is quite the lovely collarbone. Her right arm is stretched out in a beautiful manner that goes with the rest of the shape of her body, almost as she's goading you to attack her first. But at the same time, with the way her hand is being held out, I kind of feel like she's using the spell from D&D Hold Person. We get a lovely defined armpit as everything goes into this bicep sleeve. Beautiful armor design on the top. A nice repeat of silver like we get down on her legs, but a little bit lighter. They should have made the legs have a bit of highlights that were this light. The rest of the armor plating kind of suffers the same problem that the gold on most of her does, of being too faint, but the sleeve itself looks really nice. It almost has a synthetic, plasticky, silken quality to it, with the way the metallic blues are shaded by the black. We have awesome elvish designs along the top of this sleeve. Her hand comes out of it extremely well, where it really does feel as though she's wearing something. And her right hand looks absolutely great. The fingers look like fingers, they don't look weird or oddly shaped. She has some decently done nails as well. While on her left arm, being hidden behind her back, we get some lovely folds in the fabric where the elbow bends that almost feels like an anime illustration. And her closed hand here also looks very good, where they added a nice little bit of personality, having her index finger coming outwards just a bit. This whole character has so much personality, and it's probably why, despite all the gripes I have for her, I still find her to be quite a striking and amazing figure. The weapon she's holding actually comes in two parts, easy enough to plug one into the other. Cold silver metallics, with what I would assume is a black wash that they put over the whole thing to kind of fill in all the cracks. Doesn't look amazing, but it's not bad either. It works for this scale and price point. Her lovely neck has an awesome choker, and here's where I'd like to mention that there's no real visible sectioning off of plastics here. I can only assume that her neck goes into this choker, and that does a good job at hiding it, but we don't get any line work behind the jaw, around the ears, only from the hair, and it's done with such finesse that everything just seems very seamless, and I love that. Her ears are probably the best ears I have on any anime figure I've ever purchased in my life. Granted, human ears are a unique thing, and it's very particular to every single artist that draws them. So when you make an anime figure, the ears are something that will really stand out and denote many artistic styles. And this elf ear is no different. It's just so incredibly well sculpted. I love the shape, how it almost seems as though it's a leaf, the way it bevels out and then comes inwards and then goes over on an angle towards a little point. It's cute, and I like how big they are. I'm a huge fan of bigger elf ears. Again, I grew up with Record of Lodoss War. And because of this, I draw a lot of my characters' ears from my Blithe manga very similarly. I'm just a big fan. I feel like it really makes them just a little more monster girl. Because otherwise, elves have very human anatomy. As for her face, it is very nicely rounded. It almost seems Western in a lot of its angles and shapes that they chose to take. The way the nose is made, the chin, the lips, even the smaller sizing of the eyes. The lips have a beautiful gloss to them, which is a nice callback to her nails. And everything about this face is so imposing. I love how low they put the eyebrows to her eyes, and it really feels like she's got murderous intent, and that's just extra on top of how much personality this character is exuding. As for her hair, it frames her face exceptionally well. From her forehead, it does look like it was just plugged in on there, but that's not so bad, and it still gives off some really nice anime vibes regardless. We get some lovely sculpt work, and the darker paint job is okay. I think they put a little too much gray, and because of this, it's not as white-haired as I would have liked to see. Another issue I have with her hair is that it all ties up into this little hair bun at the top, which I think is okay, but I would have liked to see some sort of attachments here or something to really make it stand out just a little more. And a bit of a frustration I have is that the bun at the top, along with her hair strands on the front, are done with a different type of plastic than the main pulled back part, where these two are a little more rubbery, and they did not survive time very well. They were extremely gunky. The dust gets stuck to it all the time. I have to be very careful. I clean it pretty regularly just to make sure everything's okay, and I mean, that's just disappointing. But regardless of that, it is very well sculpted. She comes with an accessory. She is a cast-off figure, just not the X-rated kind. Well, I wouldn't say X-rated, but she's definitely getting close to that. She has this lovely little dress piece that attaches on her. It goes in with this plug system that actually plugs into itself. It's terrible the way it's done, because in order to take this thing on and off, you really have to work it and move it around the figure, which could easily scratch her if you're not careful. And I mean really easily. It's ridiculous. The piece itself is very nicely sculpted, beautiful dark blue metallics with black shading, much like the rest of her, darker gold designs all over that should have been a little more pronounced, and this dressy part does somewhat shape her behind nicely. However, while this is plugged on her, it looks like it plugs on her, which is... I'm not going to put it on her because as it's strapped around her waist, it looks kind of cheap. If this wasn't removable and they really built it around her, it would have looked a lot nicer. And I think that's a problem I have with a lot of cast-off figures, is that so often you'll look at a figure and you'll just know, because the materials don't lay on the character as nicely as they would have otherwise. Now, this is just personal preference. Some of you out there really love cast-off figures. Having the option to swap parts or even styles of your figure on a whim, it's cool. It's like you're buying more than one figure when you end up getting them. It's just not for everybody, and I prefer to see somebody put all their hard work on a figure without necessarily removable parts. Though if done well, I do love swappable faceplates. Upon her release, she was going for 6,800 yen. That's... everyone should just run out and buy one right now. Goodsmile. That is really good. I definitely would suggest her at that price if you can find one that isn't riddled with all sorts of QC issues, doesn't have the gunk, isn't literally disintegrating in your hands. It's a very frustrating figure. And I'm so frustrated because this sculpt work is absolutely astounding. I love the emotional energy that this figure exudes. She's so appealing and attractive, and it seems like a moth to a flame you would come to her, but she is absolutely going to murder you. So it's just so well done, and it's so cool. It seems like it could fit in any kind of hardcore fantasy shelf. She gives me old school Conan vibes. There's just so much to this figure I find so intriguing. Now, full disclosure, I've never played a Lineage game in my life. I don't even know what kind of game it is. I know nothing about it. I just really love elves, and I love dark elves, and this one just really fit the bill for most of the things that I like about elves. So I'm very happy with this figure, despite all the hard work and upkeep that I have to do to make her happy. Because of this, you might still be on the fence whether you're going to be getting her or not, and if that's the case, I suggest either checking out perhaps other reviews of her, or looking at a bunch of different photos of her and other people's collections. You can always check it out on the My Figure Collection webpage. I'll put a link in the description. But hopefully my review today helped you decide which side of that fence you're on in getting her or not. If you like my video just a little bit, it doesn't cost much to cast haste on that like. Hold that subscribe with a shocking grasp. Oh, and I guess maybe like lightning bolt that notification bell. This way you'll be notified of my future episodes. It goes a crazy long way at helping support the channel, and I really appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye! If you're a big fan of elves, what got you into them in the first place? I already mentioned that for me, it was Record of Lodos, but I know a lot of you that's not necessarily going to be the case, especially since Record of Lodos is like a 90s thing. I mean, elves go way back. Then again, maybe you're into some of the newer stuff. I just really like elves, and yet I feel like they always kind of get pushed aside, especially in today's day and age, with all the different monster girls that you get. I would consider elves to be the normies monster girl, and that makes sense because they're such a fantasy staple. Or maybe that's just the monster girl echo chamber that I live in myself.